Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Focus on Liberia. This is our prime time edition. My name is Dennis Jai, and we are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. We want to say welcome to all our viewers across the globe. Today, we're going to be discussing racism in America in the wake of the killing of George Floyd in the hands of law enforcement. The issue of racism has come on top again right here in these United States and even across the world. That even in some areas, they are making efforts to remove your statues and all pictures and representation of slave owners or slave masters all across the world. So racism has come to the forefront again, and we at Focus on Liberia thought we could give it some time and discuss it. With me tonight to discuss this very important topic, I have Dr. Neil Holmes, who is joining us for the second time on Focus on Liberia. Dr. Holmes, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here. Honored to be here.
Thank you. We are glad to have you. Also joining us for the second time is Miss Breezie Gibson. Breezie, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you for having me.
And we are glad to have for the first time on Focus on Liberia, my man Jusu, who is joining us from Charlotte, North Carolina. Jusu, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dennis. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Again, Jusu is a MS in some airplane science. Breezie is a doctoral student, and Dr. Holmes is an associate professor. Ladies and gentlemen, we say welcome to another edition of Focus on Liberia. It's my pleasure. Thank you for accepting the invitation to be here. Just by way of introduction to my audience, I want to start with you, Jusu. Just a little bit about yourself. Who is Mr. Jusu Gao?
Oh, thank you so much. Jusu Gao is just a simple guy, very trying to be humble in this life and taking life one day at a time. I'm from Liberia. I'm from Margibi County. And I have some interest in history. And I've been looking at the entire landscape of racism for a while now, since I was in school, read some books. I was lectured to, and today we are all seeing what we're seeing around us. So I think it was just so, it was such an opportunity to have spoken with you 2 weeks ago. And I think what really sparked it for me to be here today was an article I had written, and I shared it with Mr. Dennis. I had written this article, and it was published on TLC Africa. And it was titled "The George Floyd Revolution Is America Racist?" And I went on deliberating on what I think. And when I shared the article with Mr. Dennis, he decided to call me on the show. Like you said, I have a master's degree in aeronautical science from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach, Florida. And I have a sociology degree from the University of Liberia. Most time when I talk about it, people are like, the two are not just related. Wow. So no, the two are related. You may think that one deal with airplane, but the both of them deal with people. It's all about people. So the two are related. So yes, I mean, a lot have been said already. So as we get along, you may know, a lot more about me and of the other discussants on this show. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Jusu Gao. Next is Miss Breezie Gibson. We want to say a little thing about yourself. Full disclosure, Breezie is the daughter of my classmate from Monrovia College. So Breezie, welcome to Focus on Liberia. A little bit about yourself.
Thank you. My name is Breezie Gibson. I am currently a doctoral student in counseling psychology, and my research focused on racism in the U.S., basically what we're talking about today and how immigrants, Black immigrants, come to the U.S. and how do they experience racism, if they experience racism. And so that's pretty much what I focus on. Also very interested in family dynamics and generational differences in raising families out of your home country. So mostly immigrant issues.
Thank you, Breezie. It's a pleasure to have you once again. Last but not the least, Dr. Neil Holmes.
Yes, I'm here in Richmond, Virginia, where all of the statues are coming down. Every day a new statue comes down. I was born in this state. In many ways, it's the state where you begin to first see slavery developed as a racially based system in the British colonies. The first slave states in the British colonies in North America were in Massachusetts and Connecticut, but they weren't racially based. The first ones to be actually racially based, the first racially based laws for slavery was started in Virginia in 1661. My background is political sciences, where I've had my doctorate, and I have a master's in urban planning. My undergraduate degree is also in social work. And in all of those fields, I'm concerned about social change. And especially I'm concerned about the development of Pan-Africanism as a political movement, but also Pan-Africanism as a doable objective, as an objective that we could reach as Black folks around the world.
And as the show goes on, we will touch a little bit on Pan-Africanism, especially in the face of racism in America and also perhaps in Africa. So thank you again for coming, all of you. Our viewers watching us, this is time now for you to hit that share button, share the show, invite someone, and let us participate. Pretty soon, we're going to be opening our phone line so that you can be part of the discussion, take part, share your thoughts, and let us discuss. So let's get this going. The first question is, what is racism? And perhaps we want to start with Breezie, who has, from this psychologist standpoint. So Breezie, what is racism?
I'm trying to think what is the simplest definition that I can give for racism. I think it is just basically the belief that a particular race is superior or inferior to another, basically based on a person's social, moral traits, and basically saying that particular trait is predetermined by his or her biological characteristics. So basically, racism is a particular form of prejudice that is conceived based on the appearance of how someone look. It's made up. It's a social construct that we've all bought into as a system at this point. So I would just stop there and let the others go.
Yeah, Jusu, what's your understanding of racism?
I'm sure she did kind of summarize it, and it's just about the kind of treatment that is reserved for a person or a particular group of people based upon their position in the social strata, whether it's a prejudice, sometimes in the form of discrimination, and because it's called racism, so it's mainly due to the person's skin pigmentation. So you treat this person the way you treat them based upon the way they appear, and so the person who does that believes in your head or believes in your heart that they are superior than the person who is receiving the action. And then on the other end, it's about the person who is receiving the action, thinking that they are inferior to the person who is treating them the way they treat them. And it's just all about looks, skin color, and treatment given to people based upon their skin color, inferior treatment, and the way they look at it as well.
Dr. Holmes, can someone, who is in that inferior position, on top of your definition of racism, can someone in that inferior position also be racist?
Well, according to the definition that I use, they cannot. The definition that many of us use for racism is that it's a systemic subordination of one group by another. And in that systemic, and so it has two dimensions. The one dimension, as already been mentioned, is the mental, what's in somebody's head. But the more fundamental dimension is the systemic. That is, every institution in a racist society practices racism. Every institution subordinates one group, and that group is subordinated by another group. The group that does the subordinating, the group that's dominant, the group that has power, is the one that does the racism. So people who are victims, let's say, of racism, are victims because they don't have power. While they can't be racist, they can practice what we call racialism, which views the world through racist lenses and looks at everything looks at all causes as having racial causes. Racialism, however, is not the same as racism. Racism being that systemic, across institutional subordination of one group by another. Now, there's an additional dimension, aspect of this as well. In the United States, we have what we call a Herrenvolk system, where racism can be a cross-class phenomena in the dominant group. That is, let's say whites, whether wealthy or poor, can unite around this question of dominating blacks. So those are some of the aspects of this racism.
It's important that
it's institutional and not just simply in what's in someone's head.
And you made mention of a racist society. So that brings me to a question which was part of Jusu's article. Can any society or country or culture or community be racist? Let me start with you, Jusu, so that you can also project your article. Can any society, not just America, but can any society, any country, any culture, or any particular locality be considered racist?
Yes, I believe that a society or country and a place can be racist. The first thing we have to define what a country is and what makes a country a country. We talk about sovereignty, but then the most important thing about country is the law, the constitution of that country. So when there is racism in a country and people can be able to point to it as wrong, it's a good thing, because you have a reference point. You can say, based upon this is wrong. But if the country endorses it in its organic law, in its constitution, then you cannot fight it. And I think one of the things that was not in my article, but that is that was inferred by many people who provided me feedback. They said, why would you think about Liberia? It's a Negro country where the constitution is very clear. It tells you that people of non-Negro descent cannot be citizens of the country. A lot of people see that as racism. So, but then if you look at Liberia, are we racist when people of other countries come to our country? People of other race come to our country. We are known to be one of the most hospitable people in the world. People go there and they always have a good treatment from us. So in as much our constitution is saying that, which has its own history for which the constitution was written the way it was written. If we look at the history of Liberia, our Constitution just didn't fall down from the blue sky. It was written the way it was written because people came from a systemic racist area, and they were protecting what they had. They were protecting their land at the time. That was way back. But now in the 21st century, people look at this as being racist. So yes, I believe a place in a country can be racist. I do not have any real example now to point to a country, because it has to be not just a constitutional thing, it has to be the treatment of people as well. So so that if a person is ill-treated, if a person becomes the victim, if a person is placed in a position where they are the subordinate, where they have no reference point to be able to fight against that, that for me is what real racism is that a country could practice.
What's your view, Breezie?
I kind of struggle with that because perhaps maybe these countries and societies may not use the word racist or racism, but I do think maybe colorism is something that is gone to often. Countries like maybe Liberia or Nigeria or Jamaica, places in the Caribbean, I think they do subscribe to colorism, where someone of a fairer skin is given better treatment. So perhaps it's not necessarily referred to as racism in those areas, but they do practice prejudice and giving better treatments to those who may be of a fairer skin or a lighter, or even in areas like China even. So I am hesitant to say that racism is a word or term that is used in other countries. I think I would just go more with colorism for the sake of history, because I don't know the history of other countries. Now, I can say that for places like Brazil, like we do know that they do have heavy racism there as well. But in terms of in places like South Africa, with very defined history, but in terms of just speaking generally and saying that other countries or societies do they practice racism, I think I would say no to that.
Right. And it's very important that you mentioned South Africa, because in those days, apartheid, which is that separation based on skin color, was the actual law. Dr. Holmes, what's your take?
Well, I think when we look at racism, we have to understand it's an international phenomenon. It's all around the world, and it's tied into international economic systems. Capitalism as a system, imperialism as systems incorporate racism, and in fact, racism grows out of those things, or is enhanced by those systems. So let's talk about the Liberia situation. If, for instance, you say that you have to be of Negro descent to own land or be citizen, that's one thing. But Firestone has been there for so many years, right. With nearly 1 million acres of land. They don't have to own it. They can really impose their will without being a citizen or without being without owning land. They can dominate the land, and the loans and whatnot that were floated when that thing happened. They have had the country in terrible shape since. We can look at the same thing. The first Black Republic, Haiti, was the wealthiest slave country colony anywhere in the world. It produced so much profit, and yet when the Haitians became independent, they had to pay indemnity. They had to pay reparations to the former slave masters, and the entire. And so here you are in a majority. You've won this revolution. You defeated Napoleon's armies. You defeated the French. You defeated the British. You defeated the Spanish. You defeated the strongest armies of the West at that particular time. But yet, those countries who are normally enemies of each other now come together and say that you owe them money, and they make it impossible for you to really interact and be a full citizen of the world. You cannot trade freely and whatnot. So we cannot talk about racism just as a one country level. We have to talk about it on an international level, and see that when we look at the dominant forces in the world, the Europeans and the North Americans, they themselves have enforced this process, and other groups also buy into it. You know, you talk about colorism, and that's certainly the case. You know, you in India, for instance, it's very difficult for well, I shouldn't say very difficult, but it's quite I guess the rage for young women to buy the bleaching creams and whatnot. And I've been to African stores in Philadelphia, Southwest Philly, where you see bleaching creams to take up a whole wall in that place. And so those are internalized aspects of racism. We take on the mindset of the slave master. You know, we take on the mindset of Europeans. Instead of seeing the beauty in our own blackness, instead of seeing the beauty in our own hair texture, we because we are powerless, we see beauty in other things. Now, once we get a certain type of power, political, social, economic, and cultural power, which would mean we begin to appreciate ourselves, then we would have a different take on these things. In fact, even without power, you see Europeans going to the beach, trying to get some skin color. You see people, doing certain things, doing Botox to lips and hips and things like that. Even with a certain kind of cultural power, there are people who want to look like us, but we have internalized. This is what we call a colonial or colonized mentality, and we have that dark-skinned people, but particularly African people, Black people around the world. And when I use the term African, I'm referring to all Black people. We tend to have this internalized racism.
Dr. Holmes, can I interrupt, please, Mr. Dennis?
Sure.
I'm so happy you talk about Firestone and you kind of the issue of people of non-Negro descent not being citizens. However, you have people who are, of course, of non-Negro descent having this huge corporation right on the soil of Negroes, and it seems like they take their system with them there.
Right.
So, in this case, it has been one of the hot topics in Liberia for years. How can a country that was formed on the basis of freed men, freed people, now you have people coming on your soil and bringing the very treatment that they did to you while you were there.
Right.
They're bringing it right back to you. For this kind of situation, that's where the whole thing about the strength of your government, and in terms of the most popular thing we talk about in Liberia, corruption. Because what kind of deal do you make with these people that will enable them right on your own soil to ill-treat your people, right in front of you? You got Firestone, for instance, an American company, knowing the labor practices in the United States. You got the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, that makes sure that when you are at that kind of industrial level, there should be safety measures put into place to make sure that people are working under the most conducive safety environment. You got these people carrying this pail, this bucket, very heavy on them. They are not even wearing shoes.
Right.
There are no goggles. There are no safety goggles.
And
there are no gloves.
Because Jusu is from Makibi, so that Makibi loyalty is coming out now, so that he's but Jusu, hold that thought. We're going to
No, I just wanted to kind of sit into the whole thing about how racism follow you wherever you are because of their weak system on ground and the pre-colonial mentality, that mindset, So it is something that we have to build institution that will be strong enough to be able to have a good negotiating power with people who come to do business with you so that our people are still safe and that we don't condone any other racism while they are on our soil.
That's true. Even like the missionaries, because they've gone there, you have one white person among 20,000 Black people, and still because of what we have internalized, you still take yourself inferior to them. But let's leave that. Let's go to when we say this person is racist, what do we mean? What is it that we're looking at? What are those traits for someone who is racist and someone who is not? How do we look at that difference? Breezie, let's take a stab at that. The differences between someone who's racist and someone who's not.
I couldn't hear your question.
Right. Oh, you didn't hear me?
No.
What's the difference between someone who is racist and someone who is not? What are some of the things that we can put our finger on to identify that guy or that girl who is racist?
There are a lot of things, in trying to identify someone who is not racist and someone who is racist. And I think one of those things is that I'm going to go with the black-white binary here and saying that a white person who may identify as anti-racist is someone who is on the front line, someone who is doing their own work, who understands their privileges, who understands where they stand and how powerful their voices are and what it means to use that power for someone who does not have it. So having a seat at the table and really thinking about those people who cannot. So thinking about laws and things and regulations that are put in place and that are going to help those people who are unable to also get a seat at the table versus someone who, a white person who is unaware of their privileges and the meaning of what their race, the kind of power that their race hold. And really just not really thinking about others and really having this mindset that, well, if everyone just work hard and pull themselves up by the bootstrap, you too can be successful, and not really understanding the system in ways that it really holds individuals back from really getting that seat at the table.
And Dr. Holmes, can there be a list of things that we can check off? Because one who's considered racist, or we say, well, I have this, I have a Black friend, I did this, so I shouldn't be considered racist. Is there a list that you can, and how much of that check mark you should have before you be considered racist or not?
Well, I don't think you need a list. I think the assumption is that all whites benefit from racism, and the most conscious whites are going to say that we ourselves are trying to overcome our racism. It's the same thing. All men have some level of, we come up in a patriarchal society. In a patriarchal society, we have certain benefits because of our being men. And so we have there some sexist values and behaviors. And if we're conscious, then we are trying always to move forward beyond those. If you are a straight person and you grew up in a predominantly straight society, and then you're going to have certain anti-gay kind of values, and you think those are normal. So the other thing I think that's important in the discussion is that this thing we call racism kind of attempts to normalize that kind of power relationship between whites and blacks, and it attempts to make the subordinate position normal. So I would suggest that we don't have to go through a list of things. What we have to do is try to, if we know people who are conscious and trying really hard to break out of what the society imposes on everyone, that we help them as much as we can, help them to make every step forward, because we don't believe, or at least I don't believe, that people have to stay rooted in a certain set of behaviors. Ultimately, I sort of agree with Mr. Galdo. I think ultimately, in order to deal with this thing, we have to have a certain level of political power. And in fact, even the rubber tapper issue is one that's very kind of important to me in a way, because I used to live in Akron, Ohio, where Firestone was based. And I remember a time when rubber tappers were making $30 a month, and they gave a bag of rice and some oil, and they wouldn't even put electricity in the houses for lights and none of that stuff. And we worked with the rubber union on this side, the rubber workers union, which had a black head, a black president at that time. We tried to put pressure. It didn't really work at the level that we wanted to work, but this system is international. It keeps us from having the sovereignty, the real sovereignty that Mr. Gow was talking about, because we don't control our borders. If the U.S. has 24-hour landing rights at Roberts Field, if they can come in 24 hours and say, "Hey, I got to land a airplane there," then we don't have true sovereignty. And these are weaknesses that we have around the world. So we have to figure out, it's not a question of just Black folks in the United States having to figure out what we do within the context of the United States, or Black folks in Brazil trying to figure out what do they do within the context of Brazil. It's all of us around, or in South Africa for that matter. It's all of us together trying to figure out, how do we amass the kind of political power, economic power, cultural power, social power that makes racism ineffective and makes it only an idea and a prejudice, as opposed to real political systemic power. So we have to amass that type of power. They used to have a saying in America, something they call a Chinaman's chance. They say he ain't got a Chinaman's chance, which means that you had no chance. And then they exploded the atomic bomb in 55 or so. Then they closed themselves down and rebuilt from the inside out. And now they're, they're coming along. They're not where people would want to say. They're not they're not really all the way there now, but they're a power to be reckoned with. And when someone Chinese walks through the door, you don't have that sense of condescension, that condescension that you used to have, that people used to have when they would see folks walking through the door, because they accumulated power on an international stage, at an international level.
So Dr. Holmes, what's about our own biases? Could that be equated to racism?
Our own biases, I don't think it's equivalent to racism, because our own biases tend to be local, national, or colorism, as Sister Gibson is saying, that we have that colorism, which is again an aspect of racism, is around the world, and we've internalized it. But we have ethnic divisions. Right. Cabral talks about two types of divisions. He talked about vertical divisions, and here you might be people who live and occupy same space, have very similar attitudes in terms of food and music or whatever, but you say, well, you had an ancestor was this one, and another one had ancestors with that one, and we have these ethnic divisions. And at some point, those ethnic divisions were manipulated by the slave owners, the slave traders, and where we would go to war with each other, and as we went to war with each other, we all lost. So those ethnic divisions, those language divisions, these are divisions that are problematic, but they also can be overcome. Other groups, historically, there have been attempts to overcome. They're difficult to overcome. They're not easy to overcome because there's been some history of blood usually within these divisions. But at some point, there has to be a generation, a national generation or a Pan-African generation, as I would suggest, but a national generation in the case of any Black country, that would say that we as a generation have to create a new leadership across ethnic lines that's going to create something for everyone, because none of us can win as long as we fight each other.
Yeah.
And all we get, everybody wants their own chance to get to the table and eat. But once you get your ethnic group to the table to eat, it's just a small food. You might have a big house here and there and a fancy car, but that's really small potatoes in the world system, where we can all dine well together if we work together and decide to make this world the kind of world that our people deserve, that our ancestors have gone through so much hell for. We need to create the kind of world that our children's children deserve to have.
Jusu, let's go to our, does racism exist in America? If yes, what's the evidence to support that?
Like I said in my article on TLC, yes, racism does exist in America. And I said that the United States is not a racist country, but racism does exist in America. Someone will say, well, it seems like there's a thin line right over there. I had to find a country earlier in line with its laws, its constitution, that reference point. As a Christian man, you talk about the 10 Commandments, for example, it points you to sin. It says, thou shalt not lie. So when you lie, we have a reference point. So it points you there, that, hey, you just committed a sin. Thou shalt not kill. You killed, it points. So if a country has a reference point that you can point to and say, hey, what you just did is racism. So you go to the due process, you go to court, and you can prove that it's racism. That country is not a racist country. However, there are racists in the country who sometimes find themselves in authority. They find themselves in law enforcement, like we are talking about the whole George Floyd situation right now. There are racists who even find themselves as employers, where if you are working with them and you don't kind of know your rights, you could suffer badly under them for many years or for sometimes. So yes, racism does exist in America, and it exists in such a way where there's people who are racist, they find themselves in different levels of the society, sometimes in some very influential position as well.
Any evidence?
Yes and no. Yes, because I will tell you about some experience that I had, and maybe the panel could decide whether that was racist or not. So I'm in this church, and I've told most of my friends this story. I'm in this church, and I wanted to teach the young children in what we call Sunday school. And the church tells me, hey, you have to go and we have to do a background check, almost like you go into a corporate entity. Let's say go into one of those corporate institutions to work. You have to do a background check. I said, okay, I agree. You can do the background check. But then I went further. I asked, I said, what if you did a background check and it didn't come back good, So does that mean that I'm not going to teach? Remember, this is a church. And nobody will answer that question. It took 2 weeks. I went from one person in authority to another person in authority, and every one of them happened to be white, until I was given the audience to speak with the pastor on the Tuesday afternoon when we were there for 3 hours. And he still just couldn't answer it. However, he did give what I would call like a concept answer, because it wasn't straightforward. He said, well, Jusu, our, we kind of pay mortgage here. We have our insurance policy holder. We have, so started listing all these things that in a church language, you wouldn't even think about those things as being a reason why somebody wouldn't teach in a church. So this man is talking about insurance. He's talking about mortgage holder. He's talking about all these different reasons. And I'm still asking, but it seems that you still haven't answered my question yet, you know? So I kind of went a little biblical too with him. So I said, there's a guy in the Holy Scripture, his name is Paul. He wrote 13 books of the New Testament. He may have even written 14 because Hebrews may have been written by him. That's a whole theological argument. So he wrote 13 books. His name is Paul, a very influential guy who, in the entire New Testament, a lot of theologians and a lot of Christians reference him in many things that they do. If he were to come in a church today, will he teach? Because the story of Paul is such that at one point in time, his name was Saul, and he was a murderer. He did kill Christians. So if you are trying to get my background check, Paul doesn't qualify to teach in your church because he was a murderer, So, like I said, I could leave from our church and say, well, they don't want me to teach because I'm Black, because there was no other Black person teaching that I remember seeing. So I could say they don't want me to teach because I'm Black. But also, I came out and said, well, I think they are very ignorant of the Bible. That's what I said. So I could call that racism. And somebody could say, no, that's not racism. That's just ignorance of the Holy Scripture. You see that? And there are instances where I got a master's degree in aeronautical science. I've gone for interviews, different places. Someone might say, well, if you go for an interview, it's only an interview. There is no guarantee you're going to get a job. However, there are things that happen during the interview that I came out and said, this looks like racism. Okay, but can I walk to a courthouse? Can I carry this person to the law and say, hey, they didn't hire me because I'm thinking they are racist? I cannot really prove that. So you're going to see the shadows. You're going to see semblance. But whether you can make a hard case against these people, that is the challenge right there, If you are able to do that, I believe the system in the United States, the laws, the Constitution are going to back you. If you are able to provide evidence that these people are being racist against you because of these, what I said in my paper, because of the inherent traits, this inherent variation, I believe the laws of the United States will be able to back you. Mind you, there have been a lot of civil rights cases in this country where people won. That is, the victim, the people who were the subordinate won those cases because they were able to prove that this was racism. Yeah, and that's what I said. America is not racist, but there are racism in America.
Breezie, do you have any evidence, or do any of us on the panel know any racist in America here?
Oh, absolutely. I would say day in and day out, whether or not I know for sure that individuals identify as racist, I can't say yes 100%, but based on my lived experiences, and my lived experiences should be just as valid as any court document or any other documentation that I will need to prove that this experience did happen. Because if it happened to me, if it happened to someone else that I know, then it's valid. I've had several experiences throughout my time here in the U.S. where I've been told from I should try that I should not continue my education. Instead, I should try out for the U.S. Olympic team, or that even throughout my educational experiences, not having teachers of colors to teach me, having to go through to really teach myself Black American history. I had to seek that out for myself, while my white peers did not have to do any of those things because they were being taught by instructors that saw the world through their own lens, through similar lenses, where I had experiences where I was invalidated, that I experienced something, someone said something to me and it did not feel right, but because I could not prove it, it was invalid. That is racism.
Dr.
And
Holmes,
I like the example you gave. Oh, sorry.
Dr. Holmes, I want you to come in on that. Looked like you were trying to say something, but in what other ways, or what are the different ways in which racism manifests itself here in America?
Well, first, I want to disagree just a little bit with Mr. Gowan. In this sense, I believe that America is a racist society because you can tell there was a major white thinker, philosopher, who once said that you can tell the nature of a society by looking at the prisons. And in the U.S. prisons, African-American men are like 6% of the population of the country, but they're 50% of the prisons. 1 out of every 8 prisoners in the entire world are Black men in the United States. And Black women in the United States are the fastest growing prison population. Even the laws that we had to protect us are being weakened. They've been weakened every year since 75. They've been weakened. And today you have to prove intent. It's not enough to say that there's disparity, but you have to prove intent. You have to prove that there was something in someone's head, not merely what they did to you that was dealt with racism. However, if you do suspect racism in the interview process, you should go to your every state, most localities have what they call a civil rights commission, and those civil rights commissions can investigate those cases. We also have similar institutions to deal with housing discrimination and so forth. So, but the fact that you have those things is really recognizes that this is a racist society. So you have to have some counterbalance, and those counterbalances came at the expense of lives, a lot of hard long-term work in the civil rights movement and all of that. Even just to, every 28 hours, an African American is killed by the police. Every 28 hours. And we notice it now because why? We notice it now because, a lot of people at home, a lot of people at work. There's no sports and no playoffs. Basketball playoffs are off, no baseball. Even TV is kind of messed up now. So you just look at the news and everybody's seeing the news. And you see 3 or 4 cases right in a row. You see people killed right in front of your eyes in a very vicious and cold-hearted, cold-blooded manner. And it just merely spotlights what people have been saying on and on, that this is something that's been going on. It's systemic. It occurs across institution. It occurs across region. It occurs in every region of the country, every city and every town. So this country is in fact a racist country, and this racism informs its international affairs. It informs how it relates to other countries, and so forth. So I don't think you have to look for every little instance. What you have to understand is that this thing occurs universally in the country, occurs all stages in the country, and everyone, and we have to be aware. Now, there is one distinction between big racism and what we call micro aggressions, these kind of small things. Some said because people aren't aware, maybe, unconscious racism, and just the kind of everyday things you hear in the workplace, everyday things you hear in the street, in business place, in the store. A woman was talking to me just the other day, and she was saying, when her son died, an example of microaggression, her son died, and a white woman asked her, someone she knew from work, a professional person, how did he die? Did he die from a drive-by shooting? So she was relying upon all kinds of stereotypes in order to ask that question. These
Dr. Holmes, let me ask you this. There's been a talk about one person in this country who some believe is racist. So let me ask you this question. Is President Trump racist?
Oh, certainly, but he's not the only racist. I mean, you know, all whites benefit from racism. All whites maintain somewhere an idea of white superiority. The society is set up, is organized. That's why we say it's systemic. It's organized to ensure that the white child gets a history that's going to make them feel confident, that's going to have them go out to the world to be successful.
Okay.
And beyond that history, they're going to have more access to AP courses in the high schools that they attend than the black child.
Yeah.
And so if you have to take an ACT test, SAT test, and the stuff that's on the test is not taught in your school and it's taught at the other school, or in fact, if you have teachers who are teaching out of their subject area, someone who's teaching math, for instance, who's not really doesn't have a math background, which occurs quite a bit in many of our schools, then you're being set up for failure. So there's 50%. The African child in this country has 50% of the social investment that the white child has in terms of housing, in terms of education, in terms of health care. And yet we expect that child to compete on a same footing.
Let me stop you because I don't think Jusu agrees with you. So let me let Jusu say something and then we can go to our phone line. Professor Larry David has been waiting. So Jusu, Dr. Holmes doesn't agree with you. Say racism exists, and in fact, President Trump is racist, and not just him, but a whole host of others.
Well, I do agree that racism is in America. There are people in America who are racist. I don't agree that America is a racist country. I don't agree that President Trump is racist. President Trump, when I look at like we all have said from the very beginning, who is a racist? When a person becomes president of a country or of the United States, there are things that they have to fulfill. America is an economic powerhouse, and the president of the United States has to be in the national security interests of the country. And those are two top things on the list when it comes to national security and economics. So in order to call President Trump a racist, you must be able to demonstrate to me and other people who believe he's not a racist that there are things that he has done to hurt the Black race economically, and that he has failed to protect the Black race. So when I look at President Trump, let me say it like this first. When it comes to presidents, whether they are from Democrat or Republican, they have their policies and they have rhetorics. These guys, they all go and talk to mass number of people and they say things that they think you want to hear, and they have their own way of saying it. President Obama is a smooth talker. President Obama will make you to drink a hand synthesizer for a Kool-Aid, very smooth. And President Clinton, very smooth talker. George Bush has his own way of doing his thing. Ronald Reagan, and you can go on, the list go on. Trump is a different kind of guy. And the thing about Trump is that the way Trump talks and the things he says, he never became like that when he became president. Trump has always been Trump, and the American people saw Trump just like that, and they still used to love him. The entire Hollywood was in love with Trump. They featured him in his movies. They had him on different shows, and they were all giving standing ovation. Trump only became a racist when he did not go the way that mainstream America wanted him to go. So he became a racist overnight. But up to now, nobody have been able to show to me and demonstrate with evidence that Trump is a racist. So I do not agree on that one. And I do not agree that America is a racist country. Yeah.
Breezie, go ahead.
Trump recently posted and this discussion, I don't want this to be about Trump because we're talking about really how to address racism within our own. But just to address what you just said, he just posted a video on his Twitter that lasted for, I think, about 3 or 4 hours and had to take it down. And that was praising white supremacy. And so I think we're going to agree to disagree on that. But I do believe that there are many ways that the administration, along with the system in general, has done things that really hurt and hold back African Americans and those who are not white.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining us, we are discussing racism in America. My guest, Dr. Neil Holmes, Ms. Breezie Gibson, and Mr. Jusu. At this time, we will go to our phone lines where Professor Larry Davis has been waiting to join the conversation. And if you want to join the conversation, the number is posted on the screen there. Professor Davis, you are live.
Yes, Dennis, good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. I just want to say that I definitely agree with the young lady's definition of race, and that race is a social construct. However, people suffer from the effects of the concept of race. And what I mean by that, I want to be very clear, and I'm going to use African Americans as just as one example. African Americans are perhaps the most distinct population within the context of the American experience. Now, I say that because they are the only group of people who've had to endure some 450 years of terror, 250 years of being enslaved, 100 years of Jim Crow, decades of bad public policy decisions which have been disruptive to healthy Black family development, redlining, and a new Jim Crow, which is mass incarceration. So the issue is how Black people have been anchored in this country. Black people came to the country as slaves, as chattel, to build the country, to provide America with its primary wealth. And so, unfortunately, how people see Black people is through the lens of slavery. As you well know, Dennis, the East African slave trade lasted for over 1,000 years. African was enslaved. The transatlantic slave trade lasted over 400 years. And so, again, people are looking at African people through the lens of being enslaved. Now, I will say this with African Americans. What did they do to kind of combat racism? Well, they formed institutions, for example, like the African Methodist Episcopal Church, which is a global institution, to kind of engage the Black diaspora. The AMEs was not just about religion, but actually kind of bringing together the African, if you will, diaspora from all over the globe. The AMEs are on 6 continents. In addition to that, Dennis, I definitely wanted to say this, and I'm going to close. Liberia, for example, African Americans established Liberia, the first Pan-African country on the African continent. And as I mentioned to you yesterday, and Dr. Holmes will probably kind of tell you about this, even when you look at the charter to the OAU, now the AU, it was written by Liberians trying to unite the continent on the Pan-Africanism. I will take my response off the air. Dennis, as always, thank you so much.
Thank you. Now, let's what is systemic racism, and how is this sustained right here in America, if that exists? Yeah, Dr. Holmes, you were trying to say something, so you can say that and
systemic racism means that racism occurs across each system, each institutional system. So you see racism in the educational system, you'd see racism in the economic system, you'd see racism in the criminal justice system, etc. And so when we say systemic racism, we mean that racism permeates the entire society. I want to make one point, though, referencing your last guest there, your caller. Yeah. There's a difference between race. When we talk about race as a social construct, well, all terms are social constructs. All words are socially evolved and have social meanings that are not essentialized themselves, that change from time to time and from period to period. But but the fact that race itself is race and racism are two separate things. So to say that race is a social construct, and people usually say that to suggest that there's no biological, it's not biologically determined. And even what we know as biology today, what we call biology, has a cultural base. I mean, could today's biology have discovered the science or the reasons behind acupuncture? It didn't, and it couldn't. So so it's a distinction between race as a term and its various meanings, and racism as that imposition of one group's power on another powerless group. One last point: while Liberia, in some ways, was I wouldn't call it Pan-Africanism in a sense, because Liberia was actually a conservative force when the main emphasis for Pan-Africanism was occurring in the 60s. The Monrovia group was a counterbalance to some of the more radical groups led by Nkrumah. But what Liberia did do early on, was this attempt at how do you integrate people who are coming in from outside and so forth. How do you deal with that struggle between the mulatto class and everybody else? These are very important struggles that occurred and are still occurring in Liberia. The question of how how the country is going to move forward after the Civil War, how it integrates itself. If we can develop a national leadership out of that experience, that would be a huge. That would mean a lot for Black folks everywhere in the world.
Jusu, let me come to you on how systemic racism, how you think it's being sustained here in America.
Like I said in my article, the United States has really evolved, and the civil rights movement, kudos to the civil rights movement for what it did. The color did strike a point. How can you bring people in a country as tools to be used, and after all the years of using them as tools, and then you recognize their humanity, you look at them as a human being? That is something that is a challenge. And that's the reason why after all these years, after all these centuries, people still look at the dark skin color and all they see you as an inferior person, because in as much America is a land of immigrants, for you were brought here to build the land, and you were brought here against your will. Somebody may say, well, people came from Europe because they were running away from oppression. Well, they were running away from oppression, they got on ship and they came by themselves. For the Black men, you were brought here against your will. So for that history, the first thing here is that the Black man has to develop a sense of pride within himself. That is something that Dr. King talked about many times. You have to develop a sense of pride, that sense of somebodyness, so that when you are interacting with people, when you are interacting with people from the other race, you don't see yourself in no way as being limited. You interact with them based upon, the fact that you are a human being, and you can. So we could go on with that discussion for a very long time. To answer your question directly, I don't want to really think that systemic racism is a thing. I think it's about different institutions, like Dr. Holmes said earlier about the criminal justice system. How come, which I said in my article as well, how come the Black race in America, which is just approximately 14% of the population, is overly represented in the criminal justice system, in the prison system, with more Black males than even white males who are the predominant population? And I also gave some reasons that I thought were the reason for which that is happening. However, like I said in my article, what I said over there wasn't exhaustive of it, because Dr. Holmes said earlier that in the laws of the United States, it's always the burden on the accuser to prove intent as to whatever this person did they have the intent of being, of being racist, or what's it like an intentional racist act? And that is something that plays out in the court system in different ways. Because the country has evolved and the country is still evolving, and there were places that that was kind of dry of opportunity for Black people, and now we find the places to be oasis, for opportunity. I can really say that there is a intentional systemic racism. I think with the advocacy and all of the other follow-up from the civil rights movement, things are still evolving to be able to kind of realize that American idealism where everybody is created equal and they have the right to have equal opportunity. We are still getting there as a country.
So are you saying that?
So I'm curious to know. I'm thinking that, intentional or unintentional, the hurt and the pain is still there. So if something is unintentional, that means that we want to change that immediately. If I don't mean to hurt your feelings, I am going to do whatever I can to reconcile that. But if I do, and I say, well, that's unintentional, and I'm not doing anything to make those changes, then how am I to trust that, well, this hurt was unintentional? I don't know if that makes sense at all. But I think what I'm getting at is at your point of systemic racism being intentional or unintentional in some areas. Yes, that can be argued. However, the point here is that we as Black people continue to suffer. I'm sure when a police officer goes out here and thinks that, well, I don't intend to shoot anyone today, but they do, a life is lost.
When I talk about intent, I was just trying to reference what Dr. Holmes said earlier about the legal system in this country that is always to prove intent. That if a person did something, whether it's Black or white, and you guys went to court, they always want to prove intent as to whether the person did it with this mindset, So that is something that play off for both Black and white. The reason I brought out that example is because I was still trying to talk about the criminal justice system, which has an overrepresentation of one of the most minority population being the Black population. So I was trying to kind of make a point towards that. It was not the institutions. It was not related to all institutions. I did acknowledge, however, that institutions have evolved in the United States.
That's the point I was coming to when you say they have evolved. So
there
was systemic racism, but now is drying out. Is that what the evolution is?
There was racism in this country before. The country was a racist country way back then. We talk about Jim Crow that lasted for like 100 years. That was racism. That was a racist country at the time. When I will still make reference to my article when I said America is, I wasn't talking about America was. So what happened in the past? There have been a lot of intervention, and one of such intervention is the civil rights movement.
This question was about systemic racism, and you are not saying that systemic racism exists right now in America. That's not what you are saying.
I'm not really saying that. Yes, I'm not. I'm because I don't have any evidence to really point to systemic racism being in existence in America right now. Systemic racism did exist in America before. Okay. Yes.
Go ahead, Dr. Holmes.
Let me say something. I grew up during Jim Crow. I lived through Jim Crow, and I experienced it in the South, in the rural South, actually. And what we're facing now is actually worse in several ways. Incarceration numbers have gone up, and they went up as part of the reaction to the movement, the civil rights and Black power movements. They were reactions too. So there's a backlash to some of these movements. And we're only now digging our way out of the movements, out of these backlashes. For instance, the statues that you see in Virginia, Robert E. Lee statue and stuff, these were not built after the Civil War, right after the Civil War. They were built after the defeat of Reconstruction governments and progressive governments in Virginia. They called the readjustment movement, that were coalitions between Blacks, progressive coalitions between blacks and whites that at one time had a voter majority in the state. And once these were defeated through illegal means, terror and so forth, then the statues went up. Sometimes you didn't see Confederate flags go up in some of these places until after this or during the Civil Rights Movement. And so the movement got us to a certain point, but then there was a reaction to the movement. So the necessity to require intent came after these laws proved to be successful, these laws against racism and so forth. And so to make these laws weaker, now the government is saying then when the right wing comes to power in 80, then you have to begin 1980 and forward, actually 1973 and forward, then you have to begin to do these other things. Richard Nixon said something once. You have to understand something that was going on in the country in the 60s, late 60s. You had a coalition between what we call a rainbow coalition, blacks, Puerto Ricans, Mexican Americans, poor whites, Native Americans, sometimes Asians, sometimes liberal, very little radical middle-class whites. And you had this coalition occurring. King was doing it with the Poor People's Campaign, and the Black Panther Party was doing it with his campaigns. Richard Nixon said, "My problem is the Negro. And we have to deal with the Negro differently without looking like we're dealing with the Negro differently." Then that's when we come with the drug laws and so forth. And here, these drug laws are being broken by everyone in America. But only the black folks were being scooped up in large numbers and dumped off in the courts, in the prisons. And once you're more likely to be arrested for the same crime, but for the same, and you're most likely to be convicted. But if you and the white person are convicted for the same crime, you're going to do more time. That's systemic. You see, that's not just in someone's head. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I absolutely agree. I think I don't think we have to look very far to look at systemic racism currently. Even in institutions, educational institutions, as you've mentioned, Black kids are way less prepared than their white counterparts. There is no reason that a Black kid should have to go through years of education and not being taught through the lens in which they see the world, through the lens that the things that are happening in their neighborhood, they are told that does not exist and that they are the problem. There is no reason that there should be a 0.1% of Black people with a PhD. There is no reason why higher education should be far reach for African Americans in this country. So systemic racism in the education, in the economic, just all around is, I was going to say a bad word there. It's not good.
Mm-hmm. Earlier you said that when the moderator asked about who is a racist, mm-hmm. and giving a checklist of what could define a person as a racist and what may define a person as not being racist. You talk about people who push the cause, a white person who pushes the cause to be able to give a Black man a seat at the table, So the reason I'm still saying that is because you have these inner cities that are controlled by people who claim to be people who push the cause, mm-hmm. of minorities and of Black people. And it's been like that for decades. Mm-hmm. And these people are put in power every day. Some of them been in power for I don't know how many decades. Laws are enacted to be able to change our situation. So can we agree then, if this, if 2/3 of this panel is saying that systemic racism exists, that these people who would claim are pushing the cause of minorities aren't really doing that. Can we agree upon that? Because those cities that are hit hard when it comes to the lower level of education and the challenges in the educational system, they are being controlled by a certain group of people who claim that they have been shouldering the cause of minority and Black people for many years.
That's a regular argument. I don't want us to take that route to point at people who, because we've heard that before. Well, what are they doing? It is that are suffering.
Can I say one thing? I think he's onto something here. And
yeah, that's why I don't want to go there. But go ahead.
But I just want to say something real quick. The African community in this country is like the African community all around the world. We're suffering from neo-colonialism. So we have a number of Black mayors and so forth. It doesn't mean that they're operating in their own, in the economic, political interests of the masses of Black folks. They are part of the same structures as most leaders on the African continent. They are in their hip pocket of the people who actually run the world. And the difficult task is for us to be able to, because we're dealing with real power here, and we're dealing with power that's willing to kill. And so these are some of the things we have to deal with. Now, some people believe, that there are only two plantations: Republican Party plantation, the Democratic Party plantation. I believe that both of them are plantations. And because you step off one plantation doesn't mean you have to get on a separate plantation. You have to go to an independent plantation. I don't believe. I mean, you have to get off the plantation period and develop your own farm. I don't believe that. For instance, I get a lot of problems with that. I don't believe that Obama was necessarily good for us or good for Africa. The destruction of Libya is ongoing, and and we're seeing repercussions in Mali and Burkina Faso and all throughout the region. That was one of the biggest setbacks our people have faced. And where the AU would have gone if Libya had still been in place is a lot further than where it is now. So, I agree that many of the people who look like us and seemingly occupy seats of power are not necessarily acting in our interests. That does not mean, however, that we have to look at the other side as offering us some benefit, because the other side is actually even worse. We have to go to a third alternative. A third possibility, because
that's why I didn't want to go there, because it's just like the argument of if police kills a Black man and you talk about it, you say, well, what's about Black on Black crimes? Yeah. Those kind of things. There was another Black man who killed a Black man, so Blacks' lives are worthless, so let them, So that's why I didn't want to go there. But I think we, to a large extent, we say that systemic racism exists right here. How do we eradicate it? If Jusu believes that it doesn't exist, I don't know if you want to eradicate it or is evolving. To what extent can it evolve faster?
Trust me, I do acknowledge the unfair treatment in many systems. I have experienced some of them myself. Myself at some different level, and many friends have told me their own experiences as well. Because I do not have evidence in my hand to point to it, does not mean that I cannot explore possible, solution about it. Sure. The thing about it is that I think I will go back to my article. I said these things exist in this country, and I did attribute it to human tendency. Human tendency in such that we've been talking about Liberia here. And I've just told some of my friends a small example of what happened in Liberia. I said people live in the so-called urban area in Liberia, and they go right across St. Paul and take people's children to come and stay with them in Monrovia. And they bring their kids, and their kids receive the most ill treatment you could ever imagine, all because they are not their biological children.
Mhm.
If a white person was doing that, that would be called racism because there's a difference in skin color.
Mhm.
But because it's a black doing it on black, we don't know what word they even, maybe they'll say prejudice, maybe they'll say discrimination. But those tendencies exist everywhere. And the solution for that is love. But where does the love come from? As a Christian man, I would tell you that God's love changes everything. God's love enables you to look at people as people, human as human. I'm not a racist person. However, I make friendship based upon character. So it means that I choose my friends. Everybody cannot be within my inner circle, But that does not mean that if you are out of my inner circle, that does not mean that I hate you. No. It's just because there are certain things I want to do, and I just need people who then I can most time think a very progressive way to get this thing done. That's what I'm saying. So the love for fellow men is something that we all should pray for those people who don't have it, and we all should be able to incorporate it within our daily life. Because if you treat somebody because the person is not like you, if you ill treat them because they are not like you, even if you are the same skin color, that is still as bad as somebody who is of different skin color ill treating them because they are not like them. That's the same. So it is just the love of God dwelling in our heart to be able to make us to see people as people. And two, we live in a community where we need partnership. So we have to be able to interact with other people strategically to be able to get things done. And that does not mean that, hey, I'm going to be like the closest of friends to you, but I should have mutual respect for you. We should have respect for one another. And that is key to us fostering our relationship as different races so that we don't have this conflict going on.
On an individual level.
That sounds really simple. And I
it's not as simple. But that is a goal.
And we're not gonna go there, but I'm just gonna drop this down here and keep it moving. I hope that same, Christian principles and love that we talk about, we can also think about how that has been used in racism, right? And even in LGBTQ issues and other ways of oppression. So it sounds very simple that we should just maintain love and care. But like you said, we are humans, and that same principle on love has really been used to oppress a lot of people around the world.
I think it's a misuse of the principle. The principles are there and they are very clear. But when people misuse those principles at their own advantage, like during the days of slavery, people have something called the slave Bible, where slave master used the Bible and they say, hey, obey, 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 obey. And that's not what in the Bible that you should obey people who ill treat you, But they were manipulating folks to be able to get their aim accomplished.
Just hold on, because the Bible clearly says that. So I don't want us to argue Bible. When it says slaves obey your masters, that's very clear.
The context. The context.
We can come to that. Let Breezie continue her point.
I was also going to add that, how do we eradicate systemic racism? That's a really good question. And when I find the answer to that, I'll be sure to share it, because at this point where we are, I really don't know. I'd like to be optimistic, and I believe that we have come very far. We still have a long ways to go. And, I am thankful for individuals like Medgar Evers and MLK and Malcolm X, who really have really, set the path for us. Those are just three names, but, we still have a long ways to go. And I'm not really sure if I will be able to see it in my lifetime, or if my children will be able to see it in their lifetime. And so my answer to that is very simple. That is, we just have to start over.
All right. Let me bring in one caller to Martin to add his views before we get Dr. Holmes to come in. Martin, you are live on Focus on Liberia. Question or comment?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jai. Thank the panel for this discussion. I'm enjoying it. You know, we had the same discussion when I was in school on race. You know, but to go to the question, systemic race in America. You know, how can we eradicate it, or how can we try to solve some of the issues? I think, you know, America visual culture. You know, we have this visual culture that sometimes promotes stereotypes. We sometimes influence people to discriminate or to then become racist. You know, so we really need to, when we talk about changing this or eradicating racism, you know, we really have to change the visual culture. You know, for example, when we watch the TV, a lot of the negative things that black people do, they will show blacks, you know, looking like gangsters, looking like thugs, looking like, you know, even when they're interviewing people, compared to interviewing the other race, you know, they look all proper and all put together. You know, so we need to start changing the visual culture to present good images of all the different races in America. Because again, image is very important. We are all visual people. We like to see first. Just take for example, I've been in America since '92.
Martin,
when I did my first,
Martin,
can you hear me?
Yeah, before you change that visual culture, whose TV you're going to use?
I know that's. I mean, we're trying to promote this in America. We're trying to change the culture. Okay. You know, when we're talking about changing the culture, then all hands on deck. You know, I wrote a paper where I said, America's greatest sin is racism. America is the best country in the world. You know, I was a refugee kid who came here in December with shorts and T-shirt on. But I have met President Clinton, Colin Powell. Only in America this can happen. But America's greatest sin is racism. So America can try to curb the racism by, again, promoting some good images, you know, changing the visual culture. That will help. You know, my going back to college, I did a paper on identity. You know, my thesis. I did one of my thesis on identity. And we talk about identity. How in the mainstream America, I'm first seen as a black person who's African, who's from Liberia. Then when I go into the African American community, I'm African first, then I'm black, then I'm from Liberia. And then when I go back to Liberia, I'm American, who's Liberian, you know, who's whatever tribe. So it's like, you know, when we talk about racism, you know, it's all about creating our own identity or creating these different categories to put people in so we can feel good about ourselves, so we can empower ourselves instead of looking at the real person or the true person. You know, so again, education come in play. You know, with everything, it's all about education. Education, you know, as an educator in this country, and that's something I teach my students. You know, I tell them that the way a person look, you know, yes, it play a lot because we are visual people. That's the first thing we see. But, you know, you should dig deeper. Yeah. You should dig deeper. Just put everyone into one basket, you know, and I think we tend to do that because of the visual culture again, you know. So I think we should all start this conversation like we're doing now. And we need to tap into the mainstream carriers or channels so we can start this conversation, because if we don't do that, you know, it's sad to say, but, you know, other countries are learning from America because the melting pot philosophy, that's what makes America great, you know, but it seems like we're getting away from it. And other countries are kind of getting into that too. So again, we need to change the visual culture. We need to start the conversation, you know, and we need to start acting, you know, not just talking, but we need to start acting on it.
Thank you, Randall. If you're looking on the screen now, you see
add to what he just said?
Yeah, 1 second, Breezie. You see our FOL T-shirt. We have some FOL T-shirts. So if you're watching right now, you can just click on the link and pick up your FOL T-shirt. We also have some flyers that we'll be sharing later. the young lady you see here, Breezie Gibson, is a doctoral student. I've posted her survey in the on Facebook so that you can click on that link, and she will talk a little bit about her survey later during the broadcast. But let me bring in one more caller, and then Dr. Holmes will come in. Caller 2618, last 4 digits. Your name and where you calling from? Hello, caller. Oh, sorry. Caller, your name and where you calling from? Yeah, go ahead.
No, there's still Martin. There's still Martin.
No,
I'm
Martin,
here.
and you.
Taki
I have another caller. Last 4 digits, 2618. Your name and where you calling from?
Taki Golafale, are you hearing me?
Dr. Golafale, welcome to Focus on Liberia. Question or comment?
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Go ahead. Well, your contribution.
Oh, okay. So yeah, thank you for the topic. And I've been following. The thing about racism in America is that how I see it is that every people of color, regardless of where you come from, we've experienced racism. And one of the experiences I've had, I'm sure a lot of you may have had that experience. It's not just from the white, but the African Americans who live here. All right, they look at people who come from Africa differently. We are all black, but they look at us to be different. I experienced that in school. I experienced that at work. And if African Americans or people of color are yearning for a change, the issue of systemic racism, individual racism, policies that have been racist against blacks, they also need to look at themselves. How do they take Africans to be? All right. I've been in a class where a girl attacked my accent, and a Chinese professor was standing before the class. He understood what I was saying, but she was complaining that I have a thick accent and she cannot understand me. And then the next thing she asked me, what part of Africa are you from? In a kind of rude way. So, these are things that we have to address among ourselves as what we call black people. Sometimes I don't want to even use that label black. All right. If we don't solve our own problem, our home problem, how are we going to challenge the system that has been organized to just keep us, in this kind of condition? It can work. The African American community,
the African American complain about that also, that African immigrants look at them differently, and even they use the word akata to which they find very derogatory. So it's both ways. What's your thought?
Yeah, I agree with you. It's both ways, but I think it originated from the African Americans, because look at it. Excuse me. Normally, it is usual that people from here, regardless of their color, going to Africa, they are held in high esteem. All right? You know that. Americans leave from here, whether they're black or white, arriving like the hospitality is so much. People are so lovely. Open arms to them. Unlike on the opposite, when you come here, you see a different African American community. And then so people have a sense of developing some kind of label for them. Okay, calling them Kada, or I've heard that a lot around. But that is not nice. That is something we need to address also. We can reciprocate, the way people are, accepting us. But
Thank you.
The main thing is we have to address our own problems as black people among ourselves. If that is not resolved, the white man will just keep, the system that way. And we cannot fight a system if we cannot resolve our own in-house problem.
True. Dr. Holmes.
Thank you very much. That was my point I wanted to make.
Thank you. Let me go to Dr. Holmes first. There was a question how we can eradicate it, and then you can respond to our two callers.
Okay, I want to and I also want to talk about the love question too, because I think King talked a bit about this quite a bit. He believed in what he called the beloved community and the power of love as a transformative process. And but what he said though, he said, "Is how are you going to love someone that you don't even like, that you can't like?" He says it's very difficult to like that policeman that's killing people. And the key to that, he said, is that in a true loving situation, what you have to do is confront racism and try to transform those folks who are utilizing it, but through a process. So love to King meant confrontation. Now, in terms of what are we going to do, and I think when I talk about what I think we should do as African people, because we all African people, we've just been here for 400 years. I think the key, as I said in the beginning, is Pan-Africanism as discussed by Kwame Nkrumah. I think he was the foremost Pan-Africanist, and he, in fact, I was just reading toward what's it called? Toward African Unity by Nkrumah just before his show started. And in the first chapter, he talks about racism and how racism is a product of slavery and how racism affects both us here in the West, because he talked about the Caribbean as well as, the U.S., North America, and also in Africa. So this is not something that only exists in the United States. In order for us to defeat it, we have to build a system, a political, economic, cultural system that is capable of providing us with power, but not just power that we can use to abuse our own people. The type of power that you use to abuse someone, you take the child, you put them in your house, and you treat them very badly. That's a form of class oppression or ethnic oppression, or maybe a combination of both. We don't want that. We want to have the kind of power that that improves everyone's life from the bottom up, and not just circulate that power at the top. This is what we mean by Pan-Africanism, according to Nkrumah. And the problem that we have as between the Africans here, or the African American and Africans from abroad, is the same problem that we have between African Americans and African Americans and Africans and Africans throughout Africa. It's ethnic problem. It's the problem that we have problems with each other because we've been colonized so long. And to get beyond that problem, we have to begin the process. We overcome that problem by creating these Pan-African systems where we have to engage each other face to face as we are struggling to make some things change. And as we engage each other face to face, as we're trying to change the world and try to get power in this world, then we have to confront each other in the same way that King wanted blacks to confront whites in their racism. We have to confront each other with our ethnic problems and our own individual hangups. We have to do that confrontational thing. And our national, or really micro-national, because it's not national, it's micro-nationalist, a mini-nationalist kind of approach. We need to develop a just system. Politically, that's why we promote socialism as a system that provides justice to everyone. We see the Cubans right now fighting Ebola here. They fighting what do you call it stuff? COVID-19 around the world. This is a tiny island, maybe 10, 11 million, maybe 12 million people, and they've been able to develop some cutting edge therapies. Medical therapies, because they have a different system. They have a very low level of death from COVID-19 because they actually believe that people's health comes before profit. The United States, which has the most expensive health system in the world, is having the worst time dealing with the virus of any system in the world. The wealthiest country And the country with the wealthiest, most expensive medical system is having problems because it's based on a system that treats everybody unequally. Doesn't treat everybody. Everybody's not a victim of racism, but there's so many other negative isms that emanate from the system. So we have to create a system. We can't, Africans here can't do it. We're only 14% of the population. Single-handedly, we can't turn the system around, even with help from our allies. We can strategically work with our brothers and sisters on the continent in places like throughout South America. Brazil is majority Black, if everybody would think that they were Black. Only 8% of Brazilians say they're Black. The rest say that there's some mixture or something, and that's that's how you get a Bolsonaro in office. Colombia is 30%, 40% African. You got the Caribbean. You got Blacks in increasing numbers. In Europe, we are strategically placed. Africa's the youngest continent. It's got 1.2 billion people. It should be the most dynamic continent. If we utilize the strengths that we have internationally to go beyond our micro states, because none of them by themselves, very few of them by themselves, can be viable economically. They're simply not big enough. And one united Africa is going to have more weight and more international respect than 54 separate countries. Yeah. And we can all play a role in making that happen. This is our first politics. Our first politics in this country was Pan-Africanism. Our longest politics. And this is what we call ourselves. Someone mentioned the AME. I think you did, Mr. Josh. Somebody mentioned the AME Church, the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Or maybe the caller did. The first denomination, we called it the African. We didn't say the African American. We didn't say the color. We didn't say the Negro. We said the African. The first community institution, as Du Bois pointed out, was the African Institute. Actually, African Institute came before the AME Church. The churches came out of that. Our first schools came out of that, and we call them the African youth schools in New York and Philadelphia, places like that. So we knew early on who we were. We understood it. And this is where we have to pick up. That's, to me, the key, because when you have more power than the person who's trying to impose racism on you, there's nothing there.
Yeah. Let me take this time to give Breezie at least. Breezie is a doctoral student. She's about to complete, so she has an online survey that she wants help that we can fill out. So Breezie, if you have we'll give you a few minutes to talk about that survey.
Yes, so thank you, Dennis. So my study is it tackles a lot of the issues that we're talking about right now, particularly around—
Breezie, your video went off.
Oh. All right, can you still hear me though?
Yeah, we can hear you, but you can turn the video back on if you can.
I'm trying.
Okay, let me send you a signal.
Hang on. So it says the host will ask you to start your video. So can you?
I can only ask you to start it. Okay, go ahead. Why we try to figure that out?
Okay, so my study really is talking a lot. It talks. There we go. A lot about what we are currently discussing, race and racism. I am interested in wanting to know more about the social experiences of Black Africans when they come to the U.S. I think Mr. Jusu had, he's expressed some of those idealism, and I want to know, how are we socialized? How are we socializing our children? So when we talk about racism, when we talk about systemic issues, You know, we come from Africa, and there's so many things in Africa that we come to the U.S. and we say, this is the land of opportunities, and we're just going to go for it, and we're going to make the best out of it. But what do you teach your children when they have encountered issues that you didn't encounter in terms of racism, in terms of someone telling you or telling them that they cannot do something because of the color of their skin? How do you react to those things? What conversations are you having with them? Because we know that from a very young age, Blacks in America have had to have those conversations. So what conversations are being had in the household of Black Africans when they come to the U.S. Regarding race, if they're having those conversations at all? So I'm basically just interested in wanting to know more about our social experiences, and wanting to give, and more so Liberians. My research focused on Liberian social attitudes around race and racism. So if I'm looking for basically all participants that are from 12 years old to 99,999 years old. So if you are interested, I think Mr. Ja, you have the link. If you can put it up, I would definitely greatly appreciate you taking the survey. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes. I've gotten responses that it is kind of long, but the research community, that's just what we do. It's long. 15 minutes of your time, if you're just sitting at home watching TV and your kid, you can do it on your phone, you can do it on your computer, on your tablet. Just click on the link, and at the end of taking the survey, you have an opportunity to win a gift card as well. That's my incentive for your time. And I really would appreciate that. I need over 200 participants, children and adults. So children, I am between ages 12 to 17. They have a separate link that they can click on, and they answer their questions. And then adults from 18 and up, they can click on a different link and just fill out the survey, and everyone will have an individual chance of winning a gift card. I really need participants. I'm on the last leg of this degree, and I need my people to come through for me. I'm working to get us out there in the research communities. In all of my research, I see a lot of, I read a lot of studies on Ghanaians, on Nigerians, on Somalians. There's very few research on Liberians. And so my goal in doing this study is to really bring light to Liberians in the U.S., as Liberians are the third largest group of people of immigrants from West Africa that come to the U.S. And so I want to know more about how we're being socialized, so that I can take that into schools and into different sectors, so that we can also begin to make those changes and have some of those conversations that the conversation that we're having right now about race and racism, because there are some Africans maybe that say they don't experience racism. Well, we need to talk about that, because that's a way that we can begin to come together if we can really understand one another, and eradicate the white supremacists in their attempt to divide us. So,
thank you. And if you're watching, the link is on Facebook. If we put this on YouTube, we'll also post the link there. So if you're watching right now, you can click on the link, so you can bookmark it, that after the show, you can go there for 15 minutes and get that card.
I know you all have seen me on Facebook. I've joined just about every group possible. It's me. I'm real. It's really happening. So post it and take it, send it to your friends and family, and I really would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. And most of these things are, in order for us to make any change, there got to be statistics, there got to be study, and they use that to benefit us. So let's conclude. I know we were talking about how we can eradicate it. This is just part 0.1 of the discussion on racism, because we've just scratched the surface. So let me get your final thoughts as we go around the room, so that we can end the broadcast. I really, really appreciate your time. I don't know if I still have callers waiting. And let me read a few comments too, just to be fair to those who are watching by. Let me read a few comments. Al Street say, where you got this Uncle Tom from? He seemed like a lost brother. who have been indoctrinated by his master. Don't say that. Larry David says, how do you expect racism to truly end in the United States when Africans were brought here as a labor class? Slavery was the United States' original sin. The caller said racism is the original sin. O'Neill J. Rain said, did you know that slave master used to pay pastor to tell the slaves to obey their earthly masters? Is that divide and conquer mentality? Alfred Cobble said the only way to deal with racism is to attack its root causes. Adia say if you want to see real racism, come to Australia. O'Neill again say, I believe every African American should visit Africa at least once. So you should make that pilgrimage. When people get to understand that all men are created equal, then the problem of racism will be solved. That's from Alfred Cobway. Alfred also say, I believe that racism will never end till Jesus Christ comes. Let me get your final thoughts, and let's start with Mr. Gao.
I wasn't surprised at that statement, at the comment made by the person calling me your Uncle Tom. I'm used to that. Whenever you try to have an independent mind and think of your own, when you become non-monolithic, people feel very uncomfortable. The thing about the moving forward, in this is that I think Dr. Holmes said it in the very beginning, that we need to have a united front. He did give the analogy with the Chinese. At first, nobody was really taking them serious, but because they have kind of consolidated economically, and they have this, they have this undeniable presence. So when the Chinese man appears somewhere, everybody is forced now to look at him with some level of respect. With the manner in which we are divided as Black people, we have all these different groups based upon different social status, and it becomes so difficult for us to present a united front that will make people to look at us as a group to contend with. So that's our homework that we have to do first, so that all of these elements of racism that exist in these different societies, if we can do that, they will start looking at us as being serious. And for the people who are racist, they need to know that, hey, this is something that has been around for a very long time. Unfortunately, it almost presents the self-proclaimed superior as a fool. You look so stupid, because if you can look at another human being and think that because you got a different shade of color, so you think you are more superior than them. You look at history of different inventions around the world. In history, you find people from different nationalities, coming up with all these things that are benefiting civilization at this time. So it tells you that people, regardless of their skin color, can do great things for civilization and humanity. So we have to all do our best to go beyond skin color. That's a message that should go on to everybody, including our own race, in our own country, in our own native country, Liberia. We have to go beyond our social status. We have to go beyond all of those things that divide us, to be able to hold together, to present a united front. And with that, I believe that we'll really have the chance to really develop ourselves and live more peaceably. Just to conclude, like the sister said, that it is something that sometimes it's kind of like imperceivable. It's like, how can we even solve this problem? I mean, we can start one day at a time. It's not something with a quick fix, and it's not something with a solution that anybody can get derived. But it starts with how you treat one another, both in your own cultures and in your own tribe and in different tribes. And then you go over to the different strata of society and be able to just, incorporate that mutual respect with everybody else. And it comes with a lot of education. It comes with good institutions. It comes with just a lot of great education out there, which can only happen when we hold together as a community. That's the only way we can be able to help this.
Dr. Holmes?
Yeah,
final thoughts?
I think I'm actually quite optimistic and cautious at the same time. I think the level of protest that we've seen in the past month, really, is has helped a lot of people think through some of these things, and things that a number of people had ignored for some time are now visible. The danger, however, is that there's always a backlash to these things, and we already have a pretty dangerous, well-armed, vicious right wing in this country, which is from its own data, own literature and statements, is trying to spark what it calls a race war in the country. We, on the other hand, are trying to move people to have a higher level of consciousness, regardless of race or ethnicity or whatever. So I'm very optimistic that this is a good time, but we have to really grapple with more than symbolic issues. We have to grapple with real issues. There's a Poor People's Campaign now going on, led by Reverend Barber out of North Carolina, which is taking up where King left off after his assassination in 1968. And what Barbara says is that, over 700 people die every day as a victim of poverty. And I don't use that term people of color. I use the term colonized people, referring to African people, Latinx people, and Native people, Native American or First Nations people, because we are domestic colonies. And so we in this particular period, these groups are coming together along with poor whites to try to change the current discussion, the current narrative, and make this a narrative about how do people at the bottom get justice and what's due to them. And for us, this is important, but the most important, and I've said this all throughout, so I need to beat a dead horse though, but for most of us, Pan-Africanism is really the true solution, the total liberation and unification of Africa under a just, humanistic, scientific, socialist system is where we need to go. And we can get there. It's doable. Other people have done it. There's a certain process you have to go through. We may not see it in our lifetime, but it shouldn't be something that's going to go on forever and ever. This thing we can get it didn't take the Chinese that long. They never were at the position we were either. They never were enslaved and never truly colonized. They were dependent, but never truly colonized. But so we have to go farther than any other group. But that means that we have to work hard. And I think we are the most creative people on the planet. Mm-hmm. And, I think we have what it takes to do what's necessary to make our people be at the level of society, be at the level of international power that we deserve and our ancestors deserve.
Thank you. Breezie, soon to be Dr. Breezie Gibson.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all fill out that survey and I can. I really appreciate this discussion and I appreciate the various perspective. It's always good to hear other people's point of view. At least for me, it helps me prepare more. In terms of eradicating racism here in the U.S. and everywhere else in the world and our mentality, I would like to be hopeful and think that that will happen, but at this point I'm really not sure if it will, but who knows. I think, as Dr. Holmes pointed out, we always have to deal with the backlash. We are currently dealing with the backlash of Trump being a president from electing a Black president, and so as we proceed and go on, that backlash is always going to be there and it's always going to have an impact. I think what we need to try to do and understand, as everyone else have already said, is that we need to put on a united front, not put on, but we need to do it. And I think that white people generally, they understand and they know the power of Blackness. They know how strong we are. They know how resilient we are, and they are generally fearful of that, which is why they have in place all of these systems of barriers for us, because the minute that we can collectively come together and do what needs to be done to attain power and unity, all of their system will collapse. I also think that as Black Africans, and because I view myself as being able to walk in both shoes and see the world in both lenses, and as Black Africans and African Americans, we really need to be able to sit and have discussions about this divide that is consistently there. And once we can do that, we can move forward. I really appreciate this conversation, and it's really been knowledgeable for me. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Breezie. Thank you, Jusu, and also thank you, Dr. Holmes. It's been a pleasure having you and delving into this. We didn't quite go halfway what I've prepared, but it's all good, and I will want to have you back so that we can go to part 2 of this discussion. We just got started, and perhaps other people can join so that we can discuss more, because this should really be an ongoing conversation. If we must fight or defeat racism in all its forms, we should keep talking about it. I really appreciate your time. I want to thank all our viewers, those who call in and also those who commented. Thanks for staying here with us. Once again, I will say thank you, and I will be needing you back. So please keep your line open. We need to continue this conversation, and it's going to take all forms. Some of it will even be debate. So please be on the lookout for our invitation. At this time, on behalf of all of us here at Focus on Liberia, I want to say thank you for watching. Remember, coronavirus is still out there. Be safe. Observe all the protocols, protect loved ones and friends by wearing or doing everything that the medical persons say we should do. Until then, we will leave you, but this song that says, "We are all Liberians." We love to end with that song to remind all of us that in spite of our differences, we are still one people. Good night, and God bless you.
We are Liberians.
Good night.
Liberia is our home. Liberian people. Liberia.